Good. So now what we're going to be addressing is how to implement some CSS3 into our new HTML5 design. So we've got the progress page that we've been working on. It's the same one that if you've been following with me, you should be looking at the same type of thing inside your browser. And you'll notice that there's a lot of CSS3 that we're going to implement into this, but I think one of the easiest things we can do is start to address the rounded corners on our containing element. So the container or the content tag that we're using is the one that's holding everything inside of it. And if I switch on over to my HTML page, you can see just that. Here is my body, there's the content, and there's the closing content. So content is the thing that's holding everything together. So in order for us to get those edges rounded, what we need to do is to go to our CSS. We'll scroll down to content, and as you can see here, it's similar to what you would have done in HTML4 or XHTML. It's got a width, it's got some margins, the auto right and left margin, as well as position relative, keeps it centered in the middle of our browser, and it's got a simple background color. It's not quite white, but it's just that little off-white. So what I'd like you to do is, right after the previous declaration, I want you to add in some new information. Now, if you want to, you can put in some CSS comments in here just to keep track of things. I don't think I actually need that, but I'm going to just come in here and now add in some more information. So what I want you to write is this: border dash radius. Write that properly. Border dash radius, and we'll give it a value of something like 25 px or pixels. So what does that mean? Well, if we were to save this document right now, and if I was to preview it in my browser, let's take a look at what it's done. Hey, excellent. It's given this a round edge. And the reason it has is because I'm in Safari. If you are viewing this in Firefox, then you may have some issues. So I'm going to show you how to write it for Firefox as well. But let's take a look. What the 25 radius does is, imagine if I had a radius or a circle here that was 25 pixel amount. So the content now reflects that with either side of our elements being rounded. However, I want to also draw your attention to the bottom. Well, if the content was holding everything, shouldn't the bottom also be working in this fashion as well? Well, let's go and see why it is not. Before we do that, though, I do want to also show you that in order to make that rounded radius work in Firefox, we're going to have to write something else. Dash MOZ for Mozilla dash border radius, or border dash radius, I should say. And then we'll give our regular amount of 25 pixels. So that's all you need to make it work in Firefox as well. And in case you don't know that, I'm just going to come in here and write a little comment that says Firefox 3.6 and earlier. And that's exactly what it should be used for. So with that in place, your rounded edges are going to be just great, but there is that problem that it's only showing on the top, and let's go and see why. Well, let's take a look. There is a background image being used in the footer, and the size of that footer is reflecting the size of that background image. You see, as the background image is getting bigger, right, it's showing up here. And background image is not round, it's squared, and it's just repeating normally as it would. However, the problem with that is it's kind of throwing off the bottom. So what are we going to do in that case? Well, we don't have to touch anything in our HTML. We're just going to go to our footer. And you'll notice there's a few different footers here. Just go to the first one, the footer, right here, right where that background image happens to be. Now remember that the footer is a sort of container inside of our content. So what does that mean? That means if I round the top of my footer as well as the bottom using the same declaration that I just did, we're going to end up with something that is rounded here on the green on top as well as on the bottom. And that's not what I want. Luckily, CSS3 has some declarations that we can use that sort of help us to circumvent this. In other words, instead of putting our border to have only rounded edges everywhere, we're going to simplify that by saying border bottom right radius. So we have to put dashes, so let's do that together. Border dash bottom dash right dash radius. Just double check that, make sure I wrote it properly. Border bottom right radius, perfect. All right, and then we will say the same thing as we did at the top, just so that it looks equal. 25 pixels. So that's saying, look, only on the border's bottom right do I want 25 pixels. And if you wanted, you could also repeat this. So just to make it easier, I'm just going to copy this and come in here and paste it, and I'm going to change right to left. Perfect. All right, so now both the bottom right and the bottom left are working perfectly, unless you're in Mozilla Firefox. So I'm going to copy both of these lines, and I'm going to paste them in here. And before border bottom right radius, I'm going to include dash Moz for Mozilla dash bottom right radius. So again, dash Moz dash. And this will allow it to work in Mozilla as well. In other words, in Firefox, as well as all the other WebKit browsers. And Internet Explorer 9 for that matter. What about other browsers that don't support this, like older browsers or something like that? Don't worry. All it does is show a square box instead of the rounded box. But that's fine. That defaults nicely. It's not going to throw anything off terribly. It's not going to break your design. So just keep that in mind, though. So this is so much better than having to do it with images as we used to do way back in the early days of CSS. And CSS3 is a vast improvement based on that information. So let's just do one little final check. And we want to make sure that, yes, as you can see, even my bottom edges have been rounded just as the top ones did. So that's how you include rounded edges, not only for an entire document, but also just for, like, you know, the bottom or one side of a document. And hopefully that'll help you and, you know, allow you to do some fun things with your document. So when we come back, we're going to add some more CSS3.